Midnight in New Delhi. The fans above barely move the thick August air. On a heavy wooden desk, a single sheet of paper trembles under the weight of a man's hand. Outside, a new nation waits for his voice. Across a hastily drawn border, another new capital listens too, led by a rival who once sat beside him in the same meetings, at the same tables, dreaming of the same future. In a few hours, one sentence from Jawaharlal Nehru could unite millions or shatter them even further. His doctors have warned him. His health is failing. The years in prison have left scars on his heart and lungs. The British are leaving. Muhammad Ali Jinnah is not waiting. And Nehru has only this night to decide what kind of India will be born at dawn. To understand how a quiet, anglicized boy from a rich lawyer's mansion became the man standing between unity and disintegration, we have to start far from that midnight, in a house on the banks of a sacred river, on a cool November morning in 1889. Allahabad, 14 November 1899. The city hums with the layered sounds of colonial India, the clip-clop of horse carriages on dusty roads, the faint whistle of trains on distant tracks, the chanting from temples mixing with the calls of street vendors. Inside a sprawling white bungalow, polished floors gleam, servants move silently in cotton uniforms. This is Anand Bhavan, the home of Motilal Nehru, one of the most successful lawyers in northern India, a man so westernized that he wears European suits in the heat and drinks wine while the Ganges flows a few streets away. His newborn son is given a name as complex as the world he will grow into, Jawaharlal, precious jewel. The boy will grow up surrounded by luxury, silver cutlery, imported toys, English books stacked beside Sanskrit texts. Outside, famine and racial hierarchy crush lives. Inside, the young Jawaharlal Nehru plays in rose gardens and marble corridors, watched by tutors and servants, half protected from the brutal reality of empire. From the beginning, his childhood is a contradiction. He is a Kashmiri Brahmin by ancestry, belonging to a community of high-caste intellectuals. He is also in many ways more British than Indian. His father insists on English gowns instead of traditional Indian clothes, on Western manners instead of local customs. Jawaharlal's first real education happens not in crowded schools but in a private classroom in his own home. Tutors from England and Scotland teach him history, geography, sciences. His first language of thought becomes English. His idea of greatness is the British Empire itself, its railways, its laws, its calm, confident arrogance, and yet even as a child something in him resists. When family members talk about politics in hushed tones, about how the British favor white skin over brown, about Lothi charges on peaceful processions, about the rising Indian National Congress, Jawaharlal listens. He sees the deference with which even powerful Indian lawyers must speak to mediocre British officials. He feels, without yet fully understanding, the sting of humiliation that hangs in every courtroom, every club, every office of the Raj. In the garden, he watches ants crawling across the soil, building their fragile kingdoms. Above them, giant boots could crush everything in an instant. He does not yet know it, but that is his country. Millions of tiny, fragile lives, one careless step away from disaster. At 16, that fragile world is ripped open. In 1905, Jawaharlal is sent across the sea to the very heart of the empire that rules him. Harrow School near London is a fortress of privilege. Stone buildings, centuries-old traditions, Latin mottos carved into arches. The sons of British lords and colonial governors roam the fields in crisp uniforms, their voices ringing with the certainty of rulers. Into this world walks a tall, thin boy from Allahabad, with dark eyes and a perfect English accent, and a gnawing sense of not fully belonging anywhere. He is too Indian for the English, too English for the Indians. In Harrow's cold dormitories, he reads about Napoleon, Garibaldi, and Caesar, men who changed the destinies of nations. But when he walks outside the school walls, he sees something else. Irish nationalists arguing in pubs, suffragettes demanding votes. For women, socialist pamphlets attacking the arrogance of empire. The idea seeps slowly into his mind. Perhaps the British Empire is not eternal. Perhaps it can be challenged. Perhaps one day it can be defeated. After Harrow comes Trinity College, Cambridge. Between 1907 and 1910, Cambridge is a laboratory of ideas. In its ancient libraries, Jawaharlal dives into science, philosophy, and history. But the books that grip him most are not textbooks. They are the writings of Karl Marx, the speeches of radical politicians, the reports of revolutions in far-off lands. He attends meetings of the Fabian Society, hears debates about socialism and justice, listens as clever men calmly question whether capitalism, monarchy, and empire can survive the century. One image burns into his brain: the Russian Revolution of 1905. A vast empire shook because workers, peasants, and soldiers decided they had had enough. If it can happen there, he thinks, why not in India? But even then, he is not a revolutionary. Not yet. He is still the obedient son. After Cambridge, he studies law at the Inner Temple in London, eating in the same dining halls as future colonial judges, memorizing the very legal codes that keep India in chains. The hook of history tightens around him in a tiny, almost forgettable moment. One gray London evening, he hears a street speaker talking, not about Russia or Ireland, but about India, about how Indian peasants live and die under landlords protected by British law, about taxation that starves families to feed an empire. The man's voice cuts through the London fog and the last layer of Nehru's comfortable illusions. In a flash, he sees how ridiculous his life is. An Indian youth, polishing his English accent to perfection, learning to serve laws designed to keep his own people down. In 1912, freshly called to the bar, Jawaharlal returns to India. The train from Bombay to Allahabad is his first real encounter with his country. Not the polite, filtered stories of drawing rooms, but the smells, sounds, and faces of a colonized land. Cramped third-class compartments filled with bodies and luggage. Barefoot children running along the tracks, their ribs visible. Villages flashing by like unfinished sentences. Dust, heat, silence where there should be anger. When he steps off the train at Allahabad, he is greeted like a prince. Servants carry his luggage. Relatives congratulate him on becoming a barrister. Motilal Nehru swells with pride. His son could have a glittering career as a lawyer, earn a fortune, perhaps even receive British honors. For a time, Jawaharlal tries to follow that script. He wears impeccably tailored suits in court, argues cases with sharp logic, drives in a horse carriage while peasants step aside, eyes lowered. But the mask doesn't fit anymore. The first cracks appear when he attends a session of the Indian National Congress in 1912. The Congress at that time is more debating club than revolutionary organization. It is full of lawyers, landowners, and professionals, respectable men asking politely for incremental reforms. Jawaharlal sits in the hall and listens to speech after speech, cautious, moderate, careful not to offend British sensibilities. Something twists painfully inside him. Is this the voice of a nation that has been exploited for nearly 2 centuries? Where is the fury? Where is the demand, not for favors, but for freedom? In 1916, a chance meeting changes everything. At the Lucknow session of the Congress, amid the buzz of delegates and banners, Jawaharlal Nehru meets Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Gandhi is nothing like the leaders Nehru has known. No fancy suits, no polished English arrogance. Just a thin man in simple clothes speaking quietly but with a force that feels dangerous. Gandhi does not ask for seats in councils. He speaks of satyagraha, truth force, of non-cooperation with evil, of refusing to obey unjust laws, even if it means prison, beatings, or death. The young barrister from Allahabad feels like someone has ripped a veil from his eyes. All his Western learning, all his sophistication seems suddenly hollow compared to the raw moral power of this half-clad lawyer from Gujarat, and yet their differences are obvious. Nehru is a rationalist fascinated by science and socialism. Gandhi believes in spinning wheels, rural self-sufficiency, and spiritual discipline. They are opposites drawn together by one realization: India cannot remain what it is. Around the same time, another decisive relationship begins. In 1916, Jawaharlal marries Kamala Cowell, a shy, deeply traditional young woman from Delhi. Their marriage is awkward, tender, often painful. He is cosmopolitan, restless, impatient. She is rooted in Indian customs, uncomfortable in the political storms that are beginning to swirl around her husband. And yet she stands by him as his world changes and as the price of his conviction starts to rise. The First World War rages in Europe, and Indian soldiers die in trenches thousands of miles from home. In return, the British promise reforms. When they deliver only partial, carefully controlled concessions, resentment explodes. Then, in 1919, comes the moment that will haunt Nehru's generation, Jallianwala Bagh. In the city of Amritsar, a peaceful crowd gathers in a walled garden to protest repressive laws. Men, women, children, no guns, no threats. As the crowd swells, British Brigadier General Reginald Dyer marches in with his troops, blocks the only exit, and orders them to fire. Bullets rattle against unarmed bodies for 10 long minutes. People fall in piles. Some jump into a well inside the garden, preferring to drown rather than be shot. When the guns fall silent, the ground is slick with blood. Jawaharlal Nehru does not witness the massacre, but its shock crashes into him like a physical blow. He travels through Punjab, sees bullet holes in walls, meets families who have lost everything. The thin thread of faith that still connected him to the British breaks completely. Moderation is finished. The polite petitions of his father's generation are meaningless in the shadow of Amritsar's corpses. When Gandhi launches the non-cooperation movement in 1920, calling on Indians to boycott British goods, schools, and courts, to resign honorary titles, to spin their own cloth, Jawaharlal Nehru throws himself into it with the passion of a man who has found his true calling. He abandons his lucrative law practice. He trades his Western suits for khadi, the rough homespun cloth that becomes the uniform of resistance. He moves from drawing rooms to dusty villages, from courtrooms to crowded bazaars, standing on makeshift platforms, speaking to peasants, whose language he is still learning to speak from the heart. The transformation is almost violent. The boy raised on English tutors and foreign vacations now sleeps on charpoys in village huts, eats coarse bread with farmers, listens to stories of debt, beatings, and starvation. For the first time, he experiences India not as an idea, but as a living, suffering entity. At night, under oil lamps, he fills notebook after notebook with impressions and thoughts. His politics harden. Independence is no longer a distant intellectual goal. It is a burning necessity. It is in these years, in the early 1920s, that the first faint outlines of a future rivalry appear, one that will one day split a subcontinent. In Congress meetings, Nehru occasionally finds himself in the same room as Muhammad Ali Jinnah. At this point, Jinnah is still known as the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity, a brilliant lawyer fighting for constitutional rights, not yet the separate state visionary he will later become. Both men admire the law, wear Western suits, speak polished English. They could have been natural allies. But even in their early encounters, subtle differences flicker. Jinnah distrusts mass movements, religious symbolism, and street protests. Nehru, under Gandhi's influence, is moving in the opposite direction, toward the crowds, toward the villages, toward a politics that is messy, emotional, and vast. They are like two trains leaving the same station on slightly diverging tracks, the gap between them growing with every passing mile. The British, of course, see all of this, and they respond with the only language empires truly know, force. In December 1921, during nationwide protests, Jawaharlal Nehru is arrested for the first time. As the iron door of his cell slams shut, he feels a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The son of Motilal Nehru, the barrister's boy from Anand Bhavan, is now prisoner Nehru. The walls are damp, the bedding is thin, the food is barely edible. At night, rats scratch in the corners. He cannot sleep, but prison does something to him. Stripped of distractions, he begins to write. Letters, diaries, reflections. In that narrow, foul-smelling space, his mind roams across centuries, continents, and possibilities. He imagines a free India not just throwing out the British, but building a modern, scientific, secular state. An India where Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, and atheists can live together without fear. An India completely at odds with the sectarianism that will later fuel his duel with Jinnah. Released, then rearrested, then released again. This rhythm will mark the next 2 decades of his life. Each time he comes out of prison, he is thinner, more tired, but more dangerous to the Raj. His speeches grow bolder. While many Congress leaders still talk of dominion status within the empire, Nehru begins to insist on something far more radical: complete, uncompromising independence. This terrifies not only the British, but some of his own colleagues. Even Motilal Nehru worries his son is going too far, too fast. Behind closed doors, older leaders murmur that the young man is reckless, that he does not understand the delicate balances at play. But outside, in the boiling streets, he is becoming a symbol. Students flock to him, peasants cheer him. In Nehru, they sense not just eloquence, but urgency, a man who speaks as if time is running out. And time is running out. By the late 1920s, the empire is under pressure everywhere. The world economy is faltering. Anti-colonial movements are flaring up from Egypt to China. Inside India, the British can still arrest leaders, still fire on crowds, still pass repressive laws. But they cannot turn back the tide of history forever. They know it. Nehru knows it. Jinnah, watching carefully from his own political path, knows it too. In 1927, seeking new ideas, Nehru travels abroad again, this time not as a student of the empire, but as a critic of it. In the Soviet Union, he walks through factories and collective farms, sees electrification projects, meets workers who speak of seizing power. He is dazzled and disturbed. Back in Europe, he meets socialists, anti-fascists, and exiles who are all, in their own ways, fighting systems of oppression. These journeys deepen his conviction that India's struggle must be part of something larger, a global revolt against colonialism and exploitation. When he returns, he is no longer just Motilal Nehru's son, no longer just Gandhi's lieutenant. He is a leader in his own right, with his own vision, more radical than many of his colleagues, more impatient, more modern. And history is about to put him in a position where his impatience will clash head-on with both his mentors and his rivals. It will come together in a single charged moment. The Congress session of 1929 in the city of Lahore. The British are watching. The world is changing. Muhammad Ali Jinnah is drifting further and further from the Congress, his own ideas hardening into a separate, competing vision of India's future. Gandhi is cautious. Older leaders hesitate. And Jawaharlal Nehru, not yet 40, is about to be handed a mandate that will force him to choose, not only between moderation and revolution, but between compromise and the impossible dream of a united secular India. He can almost see when he closes his eyes. The clock that began ticking in that midnight room in New Delhi is already counting down. He just doesn't know it yet. Lahore, winter of 1929. The fog lies low over the city, muffling the noise of the crowds until it sounds like the breathing of some enormous creature. Torches flicker, flags ripple in the cold night air. On a wooden platform by the banks of the Ravi River, a 40-year-old man stands motionless, gripping the edge of the podium so hard his knuckles turn white. In front of him, tens of thousands of faces glow in the torchlight. Behind him, in the darkness, are the guns of the British Empire. Jawaharlal Nehru clears his throat. In his hand is a resolution that will, in one stroke, turn constitutional agitation into open rebellion. It has 12 calm, measured paragraphs, and the empire knows that if he reads them out, if the Congress adopts them, there is no going back. Somewhere in another city, Muhammad Ali Jinnah is listening for the news, surrounded by his own circle of followers. He used to share the same platforms with Nehru. Now he watches from a growing distance, convinced that the path Nehru is about to choose will doom Muslim minorities in a Hindu-majority India. Two men, two visions, one country that cannot contain both. On the platform in Lahore, Nehru feels the weight of more than the crowd. His father, Motilal, sits nearby, his once powerful frame shrunken by age, eyes anxious. Gandhi in his white khadi is a few steps away, expression grave. Both men know, if the British react with open repression, hundreds of thousands could be beaten, jailed, or killed. And if they don't act at all, India may sink back into the swamp of petitions and polite protests. Nehru begins to speak. His voice rises, thin at first, then tightening with steel. He reads the resolution demanding Purna Swaraj, complete independence. No more dominion status, no more half-freedom under the Union Jack. The words fall into the night like stones into deep water. The crowd roars. On New Year's Eve, as the clock crawls toward midnight, the tricolor flag of India is raised by Nehru on the banks of that same river. Fireworks crackle. People shout, Inquilab Zindabad. Long live the revolution. Nearby, British policemen take notes in small black books. Somewhere in Whitehall, civil servants will read their reports and understand. The son of a loyalist lawyer has just become the uncompromising face of rebellion, and he has started a countdown. Congress calls on every town and village to observe 26th of January 1930 as India's first Independence Day. They give the empire exactly 1 year to respond. The empire responds with silence and then with salt. Gandhi chooses a weapon so small it borders on absurdity, common salt. By law, only the government may produce or sell it. Poor villagers are jailed for boiling seawater. In March 1930, Gandhi announces he will march from Sabarmati Ashram to the sea, 390 kilometers on foot. to break the salt law. The world laughs at first, then it watches. Nehru does not get to walk that long, saintly march. The British know who their real political general is. Before Gandhi takes his first step, they arrest Nehru. Police officers surround him. His supporters shout, some cry. Kamala watches from a balcony, her face pale, one hand clutching little Indira's shoulder. The car door slams. The city recedes. Barbed wire, stone walls, iron gates close behind him. In prison, the air smells of sweat and disinfectant. The bedding is rough, the food barely edible. Nehru paces the narrow cell like a caged animal. He hears distant echoes of the movement outside. News smuggled in about Gandhi reaching the sea, about thousands refusing to pay taxes, and about students walking out of colleges, about peasants going to jail by the tens of thousands. He also hears something else, his own heartbeat, too fast, too loud. Years of strain, of endless meetings and rallies, of hunger strikes and arrests, are cutting years off his life. Doctors warn him when he's released briefly, slow down or your heart will give out before freedom comes. He laughs it off in public. In private, he stares at his hands and wonders whether his body will last long enough to see the India he is risking that body for. Time, always time. A year till January 1930. 10 years, perhaps, until the next World War everyone is whispering about. And in that shrinking window, he must help drive the British out, prevent civil war, hold India together. Outside the prison, another clock is ticking. Jinnah's patience. Humiliated by what he sees as Congress's Hindu-dominated leadership, unconvinced by Gandhi's mass politics, Jinnah leaves India for a time, nursing his bitterness in London. To some, it looks like a retreat. To Nehru, focused on salt marches and Lothi charges, it barely registers. This is the first twist of fate. While Nehru becomes the face of resistance at home, his most dangerous rival is gathering distance, a perspective and a new strategy abroad. The salt movement rises, then falls. Gandhi meets the viceroy, signs a pact, calls off civil disobedience. Nehru swallows his frustration but does not hide it. He thinks the British have given too little. Gandhi believes the nation is not yet ready for a final showdown. Between them is a strain that never fully disappears, the impatient modernist versus the cautious saint. Repression eases, then tightens again. By 1932, Nehru is back in prison, this time for almost 2 years. While his body weakens, his mind rages ahead. He devours books, writes letters to Indira describing world history, science, revolutions. In those letters, he is not just a father comforting his daughter, he is quietly constructing an entire worldview, secular, rational, internationalist. On some nights, he stares through the bars at the sky and thinks of Kamala. Her health is failing. Tuberculosis eats away at her lungs. She coughs blood into handkerchiefs embroidered with her initials. Nehru is allowed to see her only in short, heavily supervised visits. He feels a guilt that claws at his insides. His wife is dying, his daughter is growing up lonely, and he is in a cell, arguing in his mind with the ghosts of Marx, Lincoln, and Lenin while lice crawl in his bedding. When Kamala is finally moved abroad for treatment, he races to her side between prison terms. Lausanne, Switzerland. Snow on the Alps, nurses in white, the smell of antiseptic. Kamala's face is thin, almost transparent. She passes away in 1936. The man who will one day hold the destiny of 400 million people cannot save the one person who once waited up in Allahabad for his late-night returns from meetings. He breaks briefly, then he straightens. There is no time for collapse. History is accelerating. In the same year, Motilal dies. The great lawyer of Allahabad, the worldly patriarch who once hosted British judges and Congress radicals under the same roof, is carried out of Anand Bhavan to the cremation ground. With his father and his wife gone, Nehru is suddenly far more alone and far more free. There is no elder left to restrain his instincts. Congress elects him president again and again in the mid-1930s. Gandhi, who knows the young men in the party flock to Nehru, deliberately pushes him forward, grooming him as the future leader. Yet Gandhi also worries about Nehru's socialism, his love for giant dams and factories, his skepticism toward religion. Their relationship becomes a constant negotiation, affection wrapped around disagreement. Meanwhile, in a very different sort of room, Muhammad Ali Jinnah returns from England. No longer the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity, he re-enters Indian politics as the icy, precise leader of a revived Muslim League. His wardrobe is as sharp as ever, his English flawless, his belief unshaken that only constitutional safeguards and, increasingly, separate political power can protect Muslims from what he sees as Congress's majoritarian arrogance. The two men move on intersecting paths now, often in the same cities, almost never in the same meetings. When provincial elections are held in 1937, Congress sweeps most Hindu-majority provinces. Nehru tours the country by train, greeted at stations by crowds chanting his name. League candidates perform poorly in many areas. To Nehru, this proves what he always believed, that India's Muslims do not see the League as their sole voice, that class and region matter more than religion. He makes a decisive, fateful choice. In the crucial province of the United Provinces, the League offers to support a Congress ministry and coalition. Congress, confident in its victories, refuses real power sharing. Jinnah is humiliated. To Nehru, it seems like a minor tactical matter. To Jinnah, it is proof. Congress does not truly want Muslims as equal partners. A door quietly closes. Neither man will fully realize how firmly until it is almost too late. Then the world catches fire. September 1939. Britain declares war on Nazi Germany, and without so much as a phone call, drags India in as well. Loudspeakers announce that the Viceroy has proclaimed India at war. No Indian has been consulted. Not Gandhi, not Nehru, not Jinnah. For Nehru, the moment is agony. He has seen fascism up close in Europe. He loathes Hitler and Mussolini. Every instinct tells him that Nazi rule would be even more monstrous than British imperialism. Yet how can he ask Indians to fight and die for an empire that keeps them unfree? Jinnah sees a different map. Britain, desperate for support, now needs the League as a counterweight to Congress. He offers cooperation in return for recognition, the League as the sole representative of Muslim India. While Congress ministries resign in protest against being dragged into war, the League stays, maneuvers, negotiates. The clocks of war and freedom now tick and sync. Nehru understands that when the cannons fall silent, Britain will be weakened, perhaps fatally. That will be India's moment. But will India be a single nation or two? In 1940 at Lahore, the Muslim League passes a resolution demanding independent states in Muslim-majority areas. The word Pakistan is not yet in the text, but it is on everyone's tongue. A second center of gravity is formed. Two Lahore resolutions, two different midnights. One in 1929 with Nehru declaring complete independence for a united India. One in 1940 with Jinnah demanding division. Between them lies a decade of missed chances. As the war drags on, famine stalks Bengal. In 1943, as Nehru sits jailed after yet another arrest, this time for the Quit India movement, millions of peasants in eastern India sell their last pots and saris for a handful of rotten rice. Children's bellies swell grotesquely. Corpses line the roads near Calcutta. Grain exists in the country, but wartime policies, hoarding, and indifference kill more than 2 million people in a single year. From his cell in Ahmednagar Fort, Nehru reads scraps of news and descriptions smuggled in. He writes in despair, "We are helpless in prison while our people die like flies. The stone walls feel thicker than ever." He pours his rage, grief, and vision into a book, The Discovery of India, a sweeping, passionate meditation on his country's past and his dream of its future. He imagines an India where no one starves in the shadow of overflowing silos, where science banishes famine, where no child dies because of the color of his religion. Outside, while Congress leaders rot behind bars, Jinnah holds mass rallies under the green flag of the League. He speaks of Muslims as a separate nation, of injustice, of survival. The British listen. They sideline the jailed Congress, negotiate with the League, and subtly encourage the logic of partition as a solution to their Indian problem. When the war ends in 1945, Nehru walks out of prison older, grayer, and famous beyond anything he imagined. He steps into a world turned upside down. Britain is exhausted, bankrupt, governed by a Labour Party that openly talks of granting independence. But the price of that independence is now terrifyingly clear. Communal hatred, fanned for decades, has broken the skin of the country. In the winter of 1945 to 46, the trials of Indian National Army officers electrify India. Nehru, the barrister who long ago abandoned his practice, puts on his gown again to defend them. Photos of him in the lawyer's robe, arguing passionately for men the British call traitors and Indians call heroes, spread everywhere. His popularity soars. Young officers in the British Indian Army whisper, "If he can stand for the INA in a courtroom, maybe we can disobey orders in the streets." Elections follow. Congress sweeps the general non-Muslim seats. The League sweeps almost all Muslim seats. The verdict is split. Two massive mandates, each claiming to speak for the nation. The room for compromise shrinks to a knife edge. Now the negotiations begin in earnest. The cabinet mission comes from London, trying to craft a single India with strong provinces and a weak center. Long, tense meetings follow. Nehru and Jinnah sit at opposite ends of tables covered in green baize, flanked by aides, maps, and cold cups of tea. They are polite, sometimes even charming, but underneath the courtesy is granite. Nehru cannot accept a central government so weak it cannot build dams, plan industry, or guarantee minority rights. Jinnah cannot accept a strong center where Muslims, outnumbered, might one day be outvoted on matters they see as life and death. Each man believes he is defending not just a program, but a people from annihilation. At one crucial press conference in 1946, Nehru, exhausted and irritated, seems to dismiss some of the cabinet mission's delicate compromises. His words, widely reported, convince Jinnah that Congress will hollow out any agreement once the British leave. Jinnah withdraws acceptance. The plan collapses. The next twist is soaked in blood. On 16th of August 1946, the Muslim League calls for Direct Action Day in Calcutta. The city erupts. Hindu and Muslim mobs hack each other to death in alleys and markets. Bodies float in open drains. Columns of smoke rise from burning neighborhoods. Within days, thousands are dead. The Great Calcutta Killings set off a chain reaction. Riots in Noakhali, in Bihar, in Garmukteshwar. Trains begin to arrive in stations filled not with passengers, but with corpses. Nehru visits some of these areas, stepping over bloodstains that will not wash out even with monsoon rain. He is not just a politician now, he is a firefighter in a city made of dry straw. He shouts at local officials, threatens officers with dismissal, plunges into rampaging crowds without bodyguards, daring them to kill him if they must. For a few hours at a time, his presence calms the madness, but the madness returns as soon as he leaves. The British, terrified of a full-scale civil war, decide to cut and run. In March 1947, Lord Mountbatten arrives as the last viceroy, a handsome naval officer with orders to transfer power quickly. At first, the deadline is June 1948. Then, as the violence spreads, the date is hurried forward, like a patient being rushed into surgery because his organs are failing. Nehru is told, in effect, "You have barely a year," less as it turns out, to settle the shape of your country, to draw its borders, to divide its army, its finances, its railways, its very soul. If you fail, the empire will leave anyway, and the subcontinent may tear itself apart. Jinnah tightens his demand. Pakistan, a sovereign state, now or never. Patel within Congress argues that accepting partition may be the only way to avoid endless bloodshed and permanent instability. Gandhi, heartbroken, pleads with both sides to reconsider, to imagine a looser federation, a shared home. Nehru walks a narrowing ledge between them. He hates the idea of partition. To him, it is the destruction of the dream he has carried since those long nights in colonial prisons. Yet every day brings fresh reports. Entire villages wiped out, columns of refugees moving with whatever they can carry, wells filled with bodies. He lies awake at night in the new capital, listening for distant shouts that might signal another riot. In private, he weeps. In public, he becomes harder. He agrees reluctantly to Mountbatten's plan for a divided independence. The boundary lines, drawn hurriedly by a British lawyer named Cyril Radcliffe, who has never set foot in India before, cut through. Districts, rivers, even houses. The decision is made so quickly that when independence comes, the exact borders are still a secret. It is a victory twisted into a defeat hiding inside a victory. And so we return to that midnight in New Delhi. 14. August 1947 slips into the 15th. In a building that once housed British legislators, Jawaharlal Nehru waits behind a heavy wooden desk. On it lies the speech he has rewritten more times than any legal brief. Tryst with Destiny. His hand trembles slightly when he picks it up. Outside, fireworks burst over the city. People dance in the streets, hug strangers, shout slogans. Somewhere far away in Karachi, Jinnah, now Quaid-e-Azam, prepares to become the first Governor-General of Pakistan, speaking to his own new nation. Between the two fresh capitals, trains move in the dark, some packed with families clutching bundles, some already butchered into silent steel coffins. Nehru's doctor has warned him his heart is weak, his blood pressure dangerously high. The strain of the last months, negotiations, riots, threats, sleepless nights, has carved lines into his face. He has never been closer to power. He has never felt more powerless. He steps toward the microphone. His rival has his country, he has the united India he once swore to build lies broken on a map. But there is no time to grieve. At this precise second, with the clock hands trembling toward 12, Jawaharlal Nehru has to do something far more impossible than win freedom. He has to convince a wounded, burning, divided land that it still has a future. Inside the hall, the air is thick with history and sweat. Outside, history is thick with blood. As Nehru's voice soars, at the stroke of the midnight hour when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. A very different sound rises from the outskirts of Delhi, the crack of gunshots, the wail of women, the dull final thud of bodies being dumped into canals. This is the brutal contrast of his new life. On paper, he is prime minister of a free nation. In reality, he is the emergency surgeon of a country that has arrived on the operating table already bleeding out. Before dawn, he leaves the echo of applause and steps into the stench of smoke and fear. Refugee camps sprawl like raw wounds around the capital. Endless rows of canvas tents, open drains, cooking fires fed with broken furniture. Trains arrive overloaded with people who have lost everything except a rusted trunk and the memory of what their village looked like before it went up in flames. Nehru walks through the camps, his white kurta already stained with dust and sweat. Children stare at him with huge, empty eyes. A woman clutches his hand and refuses to let go, begging him to find her missing son. He knows the odds. Most of the missing will never be found alive. Yet he promises anyway, because what else can he do? Somewhere across a line that is still being drawn on maps, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, now Governor-General of Pakistan, faces an almost identical chaos. Two rivals, two states, one shared catastrophe. The political battle they waged for years has mutated into a human tragedy neither can fully control. Every day the clock is merciless. Before nightfall, Nehru must decide where to send the army to restore order, where to send the meager trains of grain, which border, crossings to open, which to shut. One wrong move and the fragile new state could disintegrate before it has even learned to walk. In cabinet meetings in the crammed rooms of the new government, voices clash. Vallabhbhai Patel, the Iron Man in Nehru's own camp, demands ruthless firmness. Seal the streets, crush rioters, show no weakness. Gandhi, fasting in a crowded Muslim mohalla, pleads for mercy, for trust, for a politics of the heart. Between them sits Nehru, head throbbing, heart racing too fast, forced to turn moral agony into administrative orders. He signs directive after directive with shaking hands. Curfews, troop deployments, emergency powers. On some nights, he climbs to the roof of his residence and looks over Delhi, its skyline lit not by festivals but by the orange glow of distant arson. Freedom, he realizes, has come not like a sunrise but like a house fire at midnight. And still he must think beyond the flames, because another countdown has already started, one of paper and principles rather than blood. India has to write a constitution. It has 3 years, maybe less, before the provisional arrangements and British-era laws buckle under the weight of 1 billion daily arguments. Nehru knows, if they fail to produce a solid democratic framework quickly, the world will say, "We told you so." Asians cannot govern themselves. So by day he fights riots, by night he fights words. The Constituent Assembly sits under high ceilings and slow fans, piles of documents spilling everywhere. Legal experts drone about federalism and fundamental rights. Outside, statues of British generals on horseback still stand, gazing at an empire that no longer exists. Nehru rises to move the Objectives Resolution, the philosophical backbone of the new state. His speech is not just for the men and women in the room, it is for skeptics across oceans and for future generations not yet born. He declares that India will be a sovereign democratic republic, guaranteeing justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity to all its citizens, irrespective of religion, race, caste, or sex. No king, no state religion, no separate electorates. For a man once accused by Jinnah of majoritarian arrogance, it is a deliberate answer. The India he is building will belong to everyone, or it will not survive at all. But lofty words do not feed empty stomachs, and hunger runs on its own brutal timetable. The war has ended, the British are leaving, but the land is tired, exhausted by colonial extraction and years of neglect. Fields crack under a sun that does not care about flag colors. Rivers flood and recede with textbook indifference. Nehru reads the reports with growing dread. Food production stagnant, industrial base pitiful, literacy barely flickering. If the monsoons fail, if the harvests falter, if prices run wild, the political victory of 1947 could be swept away in a wave of famine and revolt. He sets himself a new, impossible deadline. Within 10 years, India must lay the foundations of a modern economy, or risk becoming a permanent beggar at the world's table. The rival across the border races against a clock of his own. Pakistan, carved out overnight, must build an entire state apparatus from almost nothing. In the first tense months, Nehru and Jinnah exchange official letters and bitter accusations about refugees, about division of assets, about Kashmir. Kashmir. On a cold October day in 1947, news arrives that tribal fighters supported by elements within Pakistan have poured into the princely state. Villages burn. The Maharaja hesitates, then signs the instrument of accession to India. Nehru, who has personal and emotional ties to the Valley of Snow and Lakes, throws himself into the crisis with a fury that shocks even his colleagues. Within hours, Indian planes roar toward Srinagar airfield, carrying troops who land just in time to hold the runway. Young soldiers huddle in trenches as snow begins to fall, fighting for a territory whose future will haunt South Asia for generations. Nehru watches updates on a giant wall map, pins marking positions inching through mountain passes. He faces a brutal choice under crushing time pressure. Push the army deeper, risk a wider war with the newborn Pakistan, or seek a ceasefire, gambling that the world will recognize India's moral position. Against Patel's instincts, Nehru chooses the United Nations. He believes that in the New World Order after Hitler and Hiroshima, international law will matter. It is a decision his critics will never let him forget. The ceasefire line freezes the conflict in place, leaving part of Kashmir under Pakistan's control. Jinnah dies in 1948, his face hollowed by illness, but the state he built remains, locked in a permanent stare-down with the state Nehru leads. Their personal rivalry, born in committee rooms and conference halls, has solidified into mountains, borders, and trenches. At home, another giant shadow falls. On 30th January 1948, Gandhi is shot dead by a Hindu extremist on a cold evening in Delhi. Nehru rushes to Birla House, shoving past crowds and sobs, and sees the frail body that once shook an empire now lying still on a thin mattress. When he speaks to the nation on radio, "The light has gone out of our lives," his voice cracks. In that moment, power coalesces around him in a way he never desired. The moral compass is gone. The stern organizer, Patel, will be dead within 2 years. Jinnah is already buried in Karachi. One by one, the old giants leave the stage. Nehru, who always liked to think of himself as first among equals, looks around and realizes with a shock there are fewer and fewer equals left. He has won the power he never explicitly chased. Now he has to prove he deserves it. The early 1950s become a blur of travel and decisions. He crisscrosses the giant triangle of India in rattling trains and rickety Dakotas, addressing crowds from bamboo platforms in villages that have never seen a motor car. In place after place, he repeats the same message in different words. Democracy is not a gift. It is a discipline. You must learn to vote, to argue without killing, to accept defeat without burning the ballot box. Skeptics abroad smirk. In Europe and America, many experts predict that India will not manage even one genuinely free national election. Too poor, too divided, they say. Give it a few years and some general in dark glasses will appear on a balcony, announcing that chaos has forced him to save the nation. Nehru hears these predictions and quietly sharpens his answer. He gives the Election Commission unprecedented independence. The first general election of 1951-52 is a logistical miracle bordering on madness. 176 million people eligible to vote, most of them illiterate, spread from Himalayan valleys to tropical coasts. Ballot boxes travel by bullock cart, by boat, by mule, even on human backs up cliff paths. On counting day, the results roll in like a slow earthquake. Congress wins a sweeping mandate. Nehru is confirmed as prime minister, not just by history's momentum, but by millions of ink-marked fingers. The world blinks. The impossible has happened. The poorest democracy on earth has held the largest election in human history, and it worked. But electoral victory is not the kind of triumph he allows himself to savor. He does not need more crowds chanting his name. What he needs are kilowatts, steel tonnage, irrigation acres. His dreams now are made of concrete and calculations. He chairs meetings of the Planning Commission late into the night, the table buried under statistics. On some evenings, his mind returns to those years in prison reading Marx and Lenin, imagining a just world administered through reason. Now, with a stroke of his pen on a 5-year plan, he can redirect the lives of millions. The dams come first. In the roaring gorges of northern India, bulldozers tear into rock. Men with hammers dangle from ropes, chipping away at the mountainside. The Bakra Nangal Dam, rising like a cliff of poured stone, becomes his favorite symbol. When he stands before it, the river churning below, he calls such projects the temples of modern India. Not shrines of stone and incense, but titanic machines to tame nature, to turn the monsoon's cruelty into year-round power and grain. He is not naive about the costs, villages submerged, people displaced, but he believes the alternative is worse, a nation condemned to permanent backwardness, hostage to rain and imperial markets. Time, again, is the enemy. He wants to compress into 2 decades the kind of industrial leap that took Europe a century. Yet, even as he pours energy into steel plants and laboratories, another battlefield opens, one without guns, but just as deadly. The Cold War has begun. The world is dividing into 2 armed camps, Washington and Moscow, glaring at each other over a planet of pawns. Diplomats lean in and whisper politely threatening phrases, "You're with us or against us." They expect newly independent countries to choose a master and be grateful. Nehru refuses. He steps onto UN podiums and Asian conference stages with a different offer, non-alignment. Not neutrality, he is not indifferent to fascism or to colonialism, but strategic independence. India will judge each issue on its own merits, will not become anyone's military base, will not sign away its foreign policy for aid. To Western hawks, this sounds like ingratitude or softness toward communism. To Soviet hardliners, it reeks of bourgeois indecision. To many newly free nations in Asia and Africa, it sounds like salvation. At Bandung in 1955, under the tropical sun of Indonesia, leaders from countries that until recently existed only as colored patches on colonial maps gather in one hall. Sukarno, Nasser, Tito, Zhou Enlai, and Nehru, tall, white-haired, dressed not in robes of a Maharaja but in a simple achkan and cap, talk of a third way. Cameras flash. For a moment, it seems possible that the world will not forever be split between 2 nuclear-armed empires. The irony is sharp. The man who once struggled to keep his own party united now becomes a symbol of unity for continents. But politics is a cruel writer. It loves to set up its heroes for falls. There is another rival on the horizon, one Nehru does not yet recognize as a rival. In Beijing, Mao Zedong consolidates power. China, like India, wears the scars of humiliation and civil war. Nehru looks at China and sees a long-suffering neighbor, a potential brother in post-colonial emancipation. He pushes for friendship. Hindi Chini bye-bye, the slogans proclaim. Indians and Chinese are brothers. Agreements are signed, visits exchanged. Nehru genuinely believes Asia can rise together, its 2 great civilizations walking side by side. On maps and backrooms, however, lines snake across high mountains no one in Delhi or Beijing has properly surveyed. The McMahon Line, Aksai Chin. For decades, these names have meant little to anyone but cartographers. Now, as roads are built and armies modernized, they begin to harden into claims of sacred territory. Warnings trickle in. Chinese patrols sighted on ridges Indian troops thought were theirs. Intelligence reports hint at friction. Some of Nehru's generals whisper that the optimism is dangerous. He listens, but not fully. He believes perhaps too deeply that rational dialogue can fix what irrational history has broken. It is his blind spot, and the clock is already ticking toward 1962. At home, hairline cracks widen. The shiny steel of his planned economy begins to rust at the edges. The licenses and permits meant to guide development slowly ossify into a bureaucratic jungle. Businessmen learn new words: clearance, quota, influence. Socialists complain progress is too slow. Conservatives rage that the state has grown too powerful. On the right, Hindu nationalists seethe over his secularism, his insistence that temples and mosques are equal before the law. On the left, communists depict him as a bourgeois dreamer, too soft on landlords and foreign capital. In Parliament, he parries their attacks with wit and long impromptu speeches. In his study at night, he feels the fatigue settling deeper into his bones. The pressure is relentless, measured not just in crises, but in days lived at double speed. His doctor warns him again. His heart is overstressed, his blood pressure a bomb with an unknown fuse. Rest, they say, or your body will choose the time and place of your collapse for you. He smiles, nods, and books another tour of flood-hit regions, another summit in a distant capital, another inspection of a half-finished factory. How do you rest, he asks himself in rare quiet moments, when the very idea of your country is still so fragile that a bad monsoon or a border skirmish could shatter it? And so he keeps moving, faster and faster, just as the world around him begins to shift in ways that will test, more brutally than ever before, everything he has built, his foreign policy, his economic vision, his carefully nurtured democracy, and the image of himself as the confident architect of a new age. Far to the north, on those high frozen plateaus he once barely thought about, surveyors and soldiers from two rising nations begin to eye each other through swirling snow. Somewhere on a wall in Beijing, a calendar is flipped to a new year. Somewhere on a desk in New Delhi, Nehru signs yet another file, not knowing that within a decade the headlines will scream a verdict, harsher than any colonial judge, that the man who had outplayed an empire may be outplayed by a friend. The man who chased an empire out of India is about to watch his own soldiers run, frostbitten and bleeding, down from the Himalayas. For 15 years, Nehru has been the face of confident, rising India, the man who spoke to the world with a mixture of poetry and steel. But in the high, thin air of the northern frontiers, his softest dream is turning into his hardest nightmare. The friend he wanted in China is preparing to become his most ruthless rival, and the clock he has always raced against, history's clock, the development clock, is suddenly joined by another, more merciless one, his heart. By the late 1950s, that heart already misfires sometimes. A skipped beat here, a burst of dizziness there. Doctors warn him quietly, rest is no longer advice, it is a condition of survival. He nods, smiles, and waves them away. How do you slow down when the map in your head is still unfinished? When steel plants are only half built, when villages are only half literate, when the constitution you midwifed is still a newborn learning to stand. And now, on that unfinished map, the longest unmarked edge, India's border with China, starts to burn. At first it is just rumors, patrols bumping into each other on icy ridges no one ever bothered to demarcate. Then in 1957, intelligence reports something more brutal. China has silently built a strategic road across Aksai Chin, a lonely, lunar plain that India considers its own. The road is like a scar across a blank space of the atlas. Nehru reads the files with a flicker of disbelief. The same China whose leaders toasted him, who sent Zhou Enlai to Delhi with smiles and promises, has poured asphalt across territory, India claims, without a word. It feels like discovering that a trusted neighbor has quietly moved the fence 3 meters into your garden while you were busy repairing the roof. Publicly, he still speaks of Asian solidarity. Privately, a knot of worry tightens. Then, in March 1959, the knot is yanked hard. Lhasa erupts in rebellion. The Dalai Lama flees Tibet, crossing mountains on horseback, slipping into India exhausted and in disguise. Nehru makes the fateful choice to give him refuge. For Tibetans, it is a lifeline. For Beijing, it is an insult. For the fragile India-China friendship, it is a match tossed into a room full of dry straw. Border incidents multiply. Patrols vanish. Bodies are returned with neat bullet holes. Indian newspapers, once full of Hindi Chini bye-bye, now splash angry headlines. Opposition leaders accuse Nehru of being naive, of daydreaming about world peace while Chinese soldiers plant flags on Indian soil. He reacts with a mixture of wounded pride and stubborn resolve. He authorizes what comes to be called the forward policy. Indian posts pushed up closer to the perceived border, tiny outposts in the snow, lonely Indian flags flapping in wind that carries distant Chinese bugle calls. On maps in Delhi, the moves look neat. On the ground, they look like scattered, undersupplied men in thin coats facing a disciplined, better-armed army. His rival is no longer an ailing Jinnah or a plotting British viceroy. It is a revolutionary state led by Mao, a man who believes history is made by force, not by resolutions passed in wood-paneled assemblies. Time squeezes him from both ends now. Arms purchases take years. China's roads already snake through the high valleys. Training battalions takes years. The rhetoric in Parliament demands action in weeks. The country chants, "Give it back to China," as if borders can be moved by slogans. Under the fluorescent glare of late-night cabinet meetings, Nehru ages visibly. Hair thins, shoulders stoop, but his voice when it rises in Parliament still carries that old music. "We will defend every inch of our territory," he declares. The words sound firm, irresistible. Somewhere, a young officer on a snowy ridge hears a scratchy radio relay of that speech and looks at his rifle, at his ragged boots, and wonders, with what? Then October 1962 arrives like a storm nobody truly believed would break. In the gray pre-dawn light of the 20th, Chinese artillery opens up along the Namkachu and in Ladakh. Shells rip into Indian positions that were barely more than clusters of stones and hope. Men scramble for cover that does not exist. Radios spit confusion. The thin line of tricolors on the map is swallowed by an advancing wave of enemy arrows. In Delhi, Nehru is woken with urgent messages. The room spins for a second. He is no longer the young lawyer addressing crowds in Allahabad, nor the firebrand in British jails. He is a tired old man in a white kurta suddenly confronted with the one test he never wanted, a war he is not ready to fight. For a few days he believes the army will hold. Old instincts of defiance rise. India has faced empires before. It will not bow to bullying now. But reports begin to pile up. Tawang has fallen, units have been outflanked, ammunition has run out, men are fighting with second World War rifles against modern Chinese machine guns. On the radio, the nation waits for his voice. When it comes, one line will be remembered for decades. "My heart goes out to the people of Assam." It sounds to many like an admission that the Northeast has already been mentally surrendered, that the Prime Minister has leapt ahead in his mind to disaster. Inside his own head, another admission, far more private, pounds like a second pulse. I misjudged them. I misread the world. Under the pressure of the war, his longtime ally and shield, Defense Minister V.K. Krishna Menon, becomes a lightning rod for public fury. Critics accuse Menon of arrogance, of neglecting the army, of idealism carried into the realm of bullets. Newspapers scream for resignations. Crowds gather outside Parliament. Nehru hesitates. Menon is an old friend, but the chorus is deafening. To save his government, he sacrifices his companion. Menon goes. The anger does not. The Chinese, having driven deep into Indian positions, suddenly declare a unilateral ceasefire and withdraw from parts of their advance. They keep Aksai Chin. They keep the strategic road. They leave behind for India not occupied territory, but something more corrosive: humiliation. For the first time since independence, Nehru is no longer just criticized. He is doubted. In tea shops and drawing rooms, people mutter phrases that sting like whips. Himalayan blunder. Old man's fantasy. The mythology built around him since 1947, architect of freedom, wise statesman, global voice of peace, cracks visibly. He still walks into Parliament as Prime Minister, but the aura has dimmed. The room feels different. The applause is more perfunctory. The silences are longer. His rival, in a sense, has won without needing to occupy New Delhi. Mao has not only bloodied the Indian army, he has struck at the very idea Nehru championed, that moral authority and careful diplomacy can reshape a brutal world. The war does something else to Nehru. It presses fast forward on the physical time bomb doctors warned him about. In photographs from 1963, he looks suddenly ancient. The familiar rose in his buttonhole seems too bright for the face above it. Lines carve deep canyons across his cheeks. There are moments now in the middle of a speech when he simply stops, as if a thought has slipped out of reach. He swallows, finds it again, continues. But those tiny pauses spread a quiet terror among those who know him well. He is still racing, trying to negotiate aid, to modernize the army, to reassure allies and opponents that India is not broken, but his body is no longer a reliable vehicle for his will. At the same time, another race begins, one he tries not to acknowledge, the race to succeed him. Within the Congress Party, factional knives are sharpened quietly. Veteran leaders smile at him in public and whisper in corners in private. Some push the Kamaraj plan, urging senior leaders to resign government posts and rebuild the party. Nehru agrees, sacrificing powerful ministers to strengthen the organization, but each resignation chips away at the old wartime cabinet that once surrounded him like a fortress. He has a daughter, of course, Indira, who has grown from the shy child of his prison letters into his unofficial assistant, sometimes called Choti Mummy in the Prime Minister's residence. To the public, she is still mostly a shadowy figure, arranging schedules, managing visitors, moving silently around the edge of photographs. Nobody yet calls her a future prime minister. In smoky rooms, some Congress bosses even dismiss her with a sneer, a dumb doll. History, as always, is listening and smiling. In 1963, a no-confidence motion against his government is debated in Parliament for days. For the first time, the man who once dazzled international conferences must stand and answer a domestic charge that under his watch, India was humiliated. He listens patiently to a long parade of criticism, then rises. What follows is not his best speech technically, he is too tired for that, but it is among his most human. He does something unusual for a leader in his position. He admits error. Yes, mistakes were made. Yes, we were unprepared. Yes, I too bear responsibility. But, he insists, this is precisely why democracy matters, so that governments can be questioned, corrected, changed without the barrel of a gun. The motion fails. He survives politically. Yet the victory feels thin. He has lost something that cannot be restored by a vote count, the sense in the public mind that he is infallible. 15 years earlier, the end of empire had felt like a beginning. Now the end of his own journey begins to feel like a slow unspooling. In early 1964, his body finally makes the threat explicit. On a trip to Bhubaneswar, he suffers what appears to be a minor stroke or severe exhaustion. His left side feels weak, words come slower. He is flown back to Delhi. For days, rumors swirl. Is he dying? Who will take over? Diplomats in foreign capitals cable cautious reports. India may soon enter post-Nehru phase. Lying in his bedroom at Teen Murty House, ceiling fan whirring, he confronts a question he has artfully dodged for years. What will happen to India after him? This is his real-time limit, more terrifying than any election countdown or five-year plan target. A country of hundreds of millions, still fragile, still poor, is poised on the edge of a generational shift. So much depends on whether its institutions are strong enough to outlive the man who built them. In quieter hours, he writes, he always has. The letters that once flowed from prison to his daughter now give way to brief notes, comments on files, occasional tired jottings. His great books, The Discovery of India, Glimpses of World History, are already in the world, whispering to future readers about civilizations and freedom. But the pen now feels heavier in his hand. He returns to work, thinner, diminished, but not ready to step aside. There is no formal plan for succession. He refuses to anoint anyone. It would, he believes, betray the democratic principle for which he has staked his life. Let the party, the parliament, the people decide. Time, indifferent to principles, keeps moving. On 27th of May 1964, the race simply stops. That morning, after a quiet evening of reading and a light breakfast, Nehru complains of a backache, then suddenly collapses in his bedroom. A doctor is called. Oxygen is brought. A second heart attack, massive, final. For a brief, frantic stretch of minutes, the most powerful man in India is just another human body on a mattress, chest refusing to rise no matter how many hands urge it to. Outside, Delhi moves through the morning unaware. Office-goers jostle on buses painted with fading slogans about the 5-year plan. Children in schoolyards shout his name in textbook recitations. Radios play film songs. Then, shortly after midday, the announcement hits like a hammer. The Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, is no more. Men stop in mid-sentence. Women drop steel tumblers in kitchens. In villages where electricity is still a rumor, the news travels on the dusty feet of messengers. Panditji has died. People who have never seen him in person cry as if a favorite uncle has vanished. For all the anger of 1962, for all the criticisms, there is a sense that a loud, familiar heartbeat of the nation has gone silent. His body lies in state, wrapped in the tricolor, the rose still pinned to his chest. The crowds are almost beyond counting, millions lining the roads, perched in trees, sitting on rooftops. As the cortege moves toward the Yamuna, a river he loved in its gentler days, The human mass surges dangerously. Police lines sway. People sob and chant and reach out to touch the passing bier, as if one more brush of fingers could pull him back. Ashes are scattered where water glints in the hot sun. Somewhere upstream, in the Himalayas, the rivers that fed his dams thunder past the borders he tried and failed to secure. He dies in office, technically never having known life after power. But in another, deeper sense, his real afterlife is only just beginning. The long, contested existence he will lead in the memories, arguments and ambitions of those who come after. Within 2 years, the shy daughter who stood beside his pyre will sit in his old chair. Indira Gandhi will be sworn in as prime minister, her surname turning Nehru's familial legacy into an unbroken chain of power that many will call a dynasty. Under her, India will face war again, this time with Pakistan, will birth Bangladesh, will also taste the bitter medicine Nehru never prescribed, the emergency when democracy itself is frozen and jailed. Critics will say, this too is part of Nehru's legacy. The overmighty party, the concentration of authority in one family, the romance with state control. His admirers will counter, it is precisely the institutions he built, the courts, the press, the habits of electoral competition that eventually push back, that vote Indira out in 1977 and back in later, that outlive any one leader's overreach. In economics, his ghost stalks the landscape for decades. The dams he hailed as temples do bring light to dark villages and water to fields that once cracked in drought. The steel plants, the IITs, the scientific institutes he championed produce engineers and scientists who, a generation later, will power India's software boom and nuclear program. At the same time, the license raj that grows from his mixed economy model hardens into something stifling. Endless permissions, red tape like vine-strangling enterprise. When India finally liberalizes its economy in 1991, dismantling many of the controls he saw as safeguards, some call it an escape from the Nehruvian cage. Others argue that without the base he built, there would be nothing to liberalize, just a hollowed-out ex-colony renting out cheap labor. Abroad, his name keeps surfacing whenever countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America gather to talk about their place between great powers. Non-alignment, born as his defiant answer to the Cold War, outlasts the Cold War itself. It mutates into new forms, strategic autonomy, multi-alignment. But the core idea he fought for under UN spotlights remains that nations like India refuse to be mere chess pieces. On the ugliest issues, his record stays jagged. Kashmir, that valley of snow from his childhood tales, remains unresolved, a scar running down the spine of South Asia. The decision to go to the UN, the early arrests of political rivals there, the pledge of a plebiscite later abandoned, each becomes a stick with which future generations beat his memory. Every time guns fire across the line of control, commentators drag him back into the dock of public debate. And then there is 1962, the war that came late in his life but early in his critics' speeches. The phrase Himalayan blunder itself becomes a shorthand, not just for a military defeat but for a worldview some call dangerously idealistic. Every new border road, every modernization of the army is framed as a correction of Nehru's mistakes. Yet in quieter moments, when assessments are less angry and more cold-eyed, even some opponents admit a more complex verdict. In a world dotted with military dictatorships, coups, and one-party states, Nehru's greatest, least glamorous achievement may simply be this. He normalized the idea that Indians rule India through votes, not boots. He could have concentrated more power in his hands after Gandhi's death, when adulation was at its peak, when other countries were slipping easily into personalist rule. He did not. He kept elections messy and real. He allowed opposition, however irritating. He spoke for hours in a raucous parliament he could easily have tamed. He lost temper, he made mistakes, he sometimes indulged in arrogance, but he did not reach for the emergency switch that would have given him unlimited, unaccountable time. Instead, he raced against the time he had, flawed and mortal, trying to pull a subcontinent through centuries of development in a few hurried decades. In the end, history does to him exactly what he did to himself. It refuses to rest. New generations discover his letters and are moved. Others encounter his name only as a target in televised debates and are unmoved. Statues of him stand in traffic circles, pigeons on their shoulders, while angry speeches about Nehruvian this and Nehruvian that echo from podiums. He is praised as the builder of modern India and condemned as the architect of its delays. He is credited with saving democracy and blamed for embedding a dynasty. He is remembered as the man who spoke of tryst with destiny and mocked as the dreamer who stumbled in the mountains. But somewhere between those extremes, in the thick middle where real lives are lived, his shadow still falls over classroom blackboards, lit by electric bulbs from his dams, over courtrooms quoting the Constitution he midwifed, over polling booths where villagers stand, in line with voter IDs gripped like tickets to dignity. The boy from Allahabad who once gazed at the Ganga and wondered about the mysteries of the world grew into a man who tried, with all his brilliance and all his blind spots, to write a new script for an ancient land. His time ran out before the story did. India, noisy and contradictory, keeps turning the pages he left behind.